I confronted my husband's friend for disrespecting me, and now my husband says I overreacted. So here's the deal. I never thought I'd be the type of person to make waves in my husband's friend group. But this situation left me no choice. One of his friends has been disrespecting me for months. Subtle comments, jokes at my expense, you name it. I finally hit my breaking point and confronted him during a group gathering, but now my husband says I overreacted and that I made things awkward. I feel like I was standing up for myself, but now I'm questioning everything. Am I the bad guy here, or is my husband being unreasonable? To give some context, my husband Jake has been friends with this guy, Eric, since college. They're part of this tight-knit friend group that meets up regularly for dinners, game nights, and the occasional weekend trip. When Jake and I started dating, I was excited to be included. I thought it would be great to get to know the people who meant so much to him. At first, things were fine. Most of his friends were warm and welcoming, and I genuinely enjoyed spending time with them. But Eric, he was different. From day one, I got the sense he didn't like me. He was never outright rude, but there was always this edge to his comments. If I joined a conversation, he'd find a way to steer it back to something I couldn't relate to. If I made a joke, he'd laugh just a little too hard, like he was mocking me. And then there were the jokes about me and Jake, little digs about how I must be so patient to put up with him, or how Jake was whipped now that he was married. I brushed it off at first. I didn't want to make waves, and I figured it was just his sense of humor. But as time went on, the comments started to bother me more. It wasn't just the things he said. It was the way he said them, like he was trying to put me in my place. I tried talking to Jake about it a couple of times, but he always downplayed it. "That's just Eric," he'd say. "He doesn't mean anything by it." I wanted to believe that, but it didn't feel right. Still, I let it slide until last weekend. Last weekend, we hosted a game night at our house for Jake's friends. I was looking forward to it, hoping it would be a fun evening and maybe a chance to smooth things over with Eric. I thought, if I'm extra nice, maybe he'll finally ease up on the comments. The night started off fine. Everyone seemed to be in good spirits, laughing, catching up, and snacking on the appetizers I'd spent the entire afternoon preparing. I even managed to make a little small talk with Eric, though he barely looked at me while I spoke. Still, I told myself I was imagining things and tried to enjoy the evening. Then, during one of the games, Eric made a comment that crossed the line. We were playing a trivia game, and Jake and I were on the same team. I got a question wrong, some obscure piece of history, and Eric laughed loudly, saying, "Wow, Jake, I thought you married someone smart." The room got quiet for a moment, but then one of the other friends awkwardly chuckled, and the game went on. But I couldn't just let it go. My face burned with embarrassment, and I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me for those few seconds. It wasn't the first time Eric had made a comment like that, but this time, it felt like he was openly trying to humiliate me in my own home. I glanced at Jake, hoping he'd say something, but he just smiled nervously and made a joke to lighten the mood. That was the moment I realized he wasn't going to stand up for me. Not now, not ever. If I wanted this to stop, I'd have to handle it myself. The rest of the game night passed in a blur, but I couldn't stop replaying Eric's comment in my head. By the time the evening was winding down and everyone started saying their goodbyes, I felt like I was about to explode. I knew if I didn't address it now, it would keep eating away at me. As Eric grabbed his coat to leave, I pulled him aside near the door. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. "Eric, can we talk for a minute?" He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Sure. What's up?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Look, I've noticed you make a lot of comments about me, and honestly, they're starting to feel disrespectful. Like what you said during the game, calling me stupid in front of everyone. That wasn't okay." Eric blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Whoa, hold on. It was just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." "It didn't feel like a joke," I said, keeping my tone steady. "It felt like you were trying to embarrass me, and this isn't the first time. I've let it slide before, but I'm not okay with it anymore." At that point, Jake came over, clearly sensing the tension. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. "Your wife's upset about a joke I made," Eric said with an exaggerated eye roll. "Apparently, I can't say anything around her without it being a big deal." "It's not about one comment, Eric," I said firmly. "It's about the pattern. I've felt disrespected by you for a while now, and I'm asking you to stop." Eric laughed, a short, sharp sound that made my blood boil. "Wow. Okay. I guess I'll just watch everything I say around you from now on." Before I could respond, Jake put a hand on my shoulder. "All right, let's all calm down," he said, his voice placating. "Eric didn't mean anything by it. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." Hearing those words from Jake felt like a slap in the face. I stared at him, stunned, while Eric smirked like he'd just won some unspoken game. Without another word, Eric said goodnight and walked out the door. After Eric left, I stood there in silence, still trying to process what had just happened. Jake closed the door, turned to me, and sighed like I was the one causing the problem. "Did you really have to do that?" he asked, his tone more annoyed than anything else. I felt my chest tighten. "Are you seriously blaming me for this? Jake, he's been making comments like that for months, and you've never said a word to him." "They're just jokes," he said, rubbing his temples. "Eric has always been like this. You can't take everything he says so personally." "That's easy for you to say," I snapped. "He's not disrespecting you. He's disrespecting me. And instead of standing up for me, you're making excuses for him." Jake sighed again, clearly exasperated. "Look, I get that you're upset, but calling him out like that in front of everyone, it was unnecessary. You made things awkward for the whole group." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Awkward? Jake, I wasn't trying to make things awkward. I was standing up for myself because you wouldn't. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to have him mock me in our own home while you just sat there and laughed?" Jake hesitated, like he wanted to argue but didn't know how to respond. Finally, he said, "Eric's been my friend for years. I don't think he means any harm, and I don't want to create drama over something that wasn't a big deal." I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Well, it is a big deal to me, and if you can't see that, then maybe we have a bigger problem than Eric." Jake didn't say anything after that, just walked into the living room and turned on the TV like we hadn't just had one of the most frustrating conversations of our marriage. I went to bed alone that night, staring at the ceiling and wondering how things had gotten to this point. The next few days were tense, to say the least. Jake and I barely spoke to each other, and when we did, it was short and cold. I was still furious about his reaction, or lack of one, and he seemed annoyed that I couldn't just let it go. The worst part was that Eric's words kept replaying in my head. It wasn't just the trivia comment. It was every little jab he'd made over the months. All the times he'd made me feel small, like I didn't belong in their group. And now, it felt like Jake was siding with him, not me. I tried to focus on work and other distractions, but it was hard. Every time I saw Jake sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone or laughing at something on TV, I wanted to scream. How could he be so casual when I was still stewing over this? Finally, after 3 days of this standoff, Jake broke the silence. "Are we really going to keep doing this?" he asked one night as we sat at the dinner table, eating in awkward silence. "Doing what?" I said, not looking up from my plate. "This," he said, gesturing between us. Not talking, acting like everything's falling apart over one stupid argument. "It's not just one argument, Jake," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "It's about you not having my back. It's about you letting Eric disrespect me over and over again, and brushing it off like it doesn't matter." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know what you want me to do, okay? Eric's my friend. He's always been like this. If I start calling him out for everything he says, it's going to cause a rift in the group." "And what about the rift it's causing in our marriage?" I shot back. "Do you care about that, or is keeping the peace with Eric more important?" Jake didn't respond right away, and for a moment, I thought he might finally get it. But then he said, "I just think you're blowing this out of proportion." I stood up, pushing my chair back with more force than I intended. "If you can't understand why this matters to me, then maybe you're the one who's out of proportion, Jake." I walked out of the room before he could respond, slamming the bedroom door behind me. I didn't know what else to say, or if saying anything would even make a difference. After that blow-up, I realized I needed to talk to someone who wasn't Jake. I felt like I was losing my mind trying to explain why Eric's behavior hurt me, only to be met with excuses and dismissiveness. So I called my best friend, Claire. She's always been my sounding board, and I trusted her to give me an honest perspective. When I told her everything, she didn't hold back. "Okay, first of all, you did not overreact," Claire said firmly. "Eric sounds like a jerk, and Jake not standing up for you is a huge red flag. You deserve someone who has your back, not someone who's more worried about keeping his buddy happy." Hearing her say that felt validating, but it also made the knot in my stomach tighten. I just don't get why Jake can't see how much this is bothering me, I said. I'm not asking him to end his friendship with Eric. I'm just asking for a little support. Claire sighed. Honestly, it sounds like Jake is afraid of rocking the boat with his friend group. Guys like Eric thrive on that kind of dynamic. They push boundaries, and no one calls them out because they don't want to be the one to ruin the vibe. That's exactly what it feels like, I said. Like I'm the bad guy for not just laughing it off. You're not the bad guy, Claire said, but you need to decide how far you're willing to let this go. If Jake isn't willing to stand up for you, are you okay with standing up for yourself every time? Because it doesn't sound like Eric is going to stop anytime soon. Her words hit me hard. I realized she was right. I couldn't control Eric's behavior, but I could control how I responded to it. The question was whether Jake and I could get on the same page, or if this was something I'd have to keep handling on my own. After my talk with Claire, I decided it was time to have a serious conversation with Jake, one where I laid everything out and didn't let him dismiss my feelings. I couldn't keep stewing in silence, and I didn't want this to turn into a wedge that drove us further apart. That evening, I told Jake we needed to talk. He looked hesitant, but he nodded and sat down with me on the couch. Jake, I began, I need you to really listen to me this time. No excuses, no brushing it off. Just listen. Okay, he said, though his expression was guarded. I took a deep breath and let it all out. When Eric makes those comments, it makes me feel small and unwelcome. And when you don't say anything, it feels like you're agreeing with him, like you're choosing him over me. I know he's your friend, and I'm not asking you to end your friendship, but I need you to understand how much this hurts. Jake's face softened, but he still seemed unsure. I get that you're upset, but Eric doesn't mean any harm. That's just his humor. I shook my head. It doesn't matter if he means harm, Jake. The impact is the same. And when you don't stand up for me, it feels like you're okay with him treating me that way. He was quiet for a moment, and I could tell he was actually thinking about what I'd said. Finally, he sighed. I guess I didn't realize how much it was bothering you. I don't know how to handle stuff like this. Eric's been my friend for so long, and calling him out feels like I'm betraying him. Standing up for me isn't betraying him, I said gently. It's showing him that you value me too. If he's really your friend, he'll respect that. Jake nodded slowly. You're right. I've been handling this all wrong. I just hate confrontation, but that's not an excuse. I should have said something sooner. Hearing him acknowledge that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. That's all I wanted, I said. I just needed to know you're on my side. We sat there for a while, talking about how to handle things moving forward. Jake admitted he was nervous about bringing it up with Eric, but he promised he'd have a conversation with him. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it felt like a step in the right direction. A few days later, Jake told me he was going to talk to Eric about everything. I could tell he was nervous. He kept fidgeting and asking me if there was anything specific I wanted him to say. Just be honest, I told him. Tell him how his comments affect me and why it's important for him to stop. That evening, Jake met up with Eric for drinks. I stayed home, alternating between feeling hopeful and anxious. I wasn't sure how Eric would react, and I didn't want this to turn into a bigger issue. All I wanted was for him to treat me with basic respect, and for Jake to show that he had my back. When Jake came home later that night, he looked relieved, but also a little exhausted. How did it go? I asked cautiously. Jake dropped his keys on the counter and sighed. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. At first, Eric kinda laughed it off, like he always does. He said he didn't realize you were taking his jokes so seriously. But when I pushed back and told him it wasn't just one comment, he actually listened. And, I pressed, holding my breath. He apologized, Jake said. He said he didn't mean to upset you, and that he'd be more mindful in the future. I don't know how sincere he was, but at least he knows where we stand now. Hearing that was a huge relief, though I couldn't shake the feeling that Eric's apology might just be for show. Still, the fact that Jake had that conversation meant everything to me. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we were on the same page. Thank you, I said, pulling him into a hug. I know that wasn't easy for you. Jake smiled. It wasn't, but it was worth it. I should have done it a long time ago. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. And for now, that was enough. The next time we saw Eric was at another gathering with Jake's friend group. I was nervous, unsure of how things would play out. Would Eric actually change his behavior? Or would it just be more of the same? Jake seemed more relaxed, but I could tell he was keeping an eye on things too. When we arrived, Eric greeted us like nothing had happened. At first, I couldn't tell if that was a good sign or a bad one. He was his usual loud, jokey self, but there was a noticeable difference. He didn't make any digs at me. No backhanded compliments, no snide remarks, nothing. At one point during the evening, we ended up in the same conversation circle. I was bracing myself for some kind of comment when someone brought up a topic I actually knew a lot about: travel planning. Eric started to say something, then paused, glanced at Jake, and just nodded along instead. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge to me. He was clearly trying to dial it back, and while I wasn't ready to forgive and forget just yet, I appreciated the effort. Later that night, as Jake and I were leaving, Eric actually pulled me aside. "Hey," he said, looking a little uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry if I've ever made you feel unwelcome. I didn't mean anything by the stuff I said, but I'll try to be better about it." It wasn't the warmest or most heartfelt apology, but it felt genuine enough. "Thank you," I said, keeping my response simple. "I appreciate that." On the drive home, Jake asked me how I felt about the evening. "Better," I said honestly. "It's a start." He smiled, looking relieved. "I'm glad. I don't want you to feel like you don't belong." For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. Not just about my relationship with Eric, but about my marriage too. After that night, things felt lighter, both between Jake and me and with the friend group. Eric wasn't magically transformed, but he kept his word. The passive-aggressive jokes stopped, and he treated me with more respect during our interactions. It wasn't perfect, but it was a noticeable improvement. Jake and I also came out of this stronger. His willingness to have that uncomfortable conversation with Eric showed me that he valued my feelings and was willing to step out of his comfort zone for our relationship. It wasn't easy for him, but he did it, and that meant the world to me. One evening, Jake brought up something that caught me off guard. "You know, I think I've let Eric get away with too much over the years. Not just with you, but with other people too. I guess I didn't want to rock the boat, but maybe I should have done it sooner." I smiled, appreciating his honesty. "It's not easy to confront someone you care about, but you did the right thing. And now, we know we can handle stuff like this together." It felt good to know that Jake had my back, even if it took a while for him to get there. It reminded me that relationships, whether with friends, spouses, or anyone else, require communication, boundaries, and mutual respect to thrive. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a tricky situation like this, I'd love to hear about it. How did you handle it? Did it bring you closer to the people involved, or did it cause more distance? Drop your stories in the comments. I think we can all learn a lot from each other. And for anyone struggling to find their voice, remember this: advocating for yourself isn't overreacting. It's a sign of strength and self-respect. The people who truly value you will listen, even if it takes them a little time to understand.